Mauritius nation to welcome you today to the Third Africa Congress of Accountants. It's a great day for our country and for the Mauritius Institute of Professional Accountants and the Pan-African Federation of Accountants. We are very, very happy to see you here this afternoon. Without much further ado, I'd like to call upon Honorable Xavier Duval, Deputy Prime Minister of Mauritius. The Honorable Xavier Duval is a former Minister of Finance, was voted twice African Minister of the Year by Africa Investor in 2012 and 2013, as well as African Finance Minister of the Year by African Leadership Magazine. In 2013, he was chosen as Chairman of a Global Advisory Board by African Leadership Network. The trademark of Honorable Duval remains undeniably his African policy and his continuous efforts to promote Mauritius as a gateway to the continent for investment, promotional activities and support to enterprises, networking and training during his mandate. As Minister of Finance, Honorable Duval.
I don't think I've addressed so many accountants in one event before. It's a pleasure. Firstly, let me give a warm welcome, very warm welcome to all the delegates, of course, especially to delegates from overseas. If for some of you it's your first visit to Mauritius, I do hope that as Minister of Tourism you found the accommodation up to your standard and that you enjoy our wonderful island. I think it's a pleasure. We have 600 foreign delegates, mostly from Africa, and I think it's a pleasure for us to be able to talk to all of you, and perhaps just later on talk a little bit about the challenges facing us in Mauritius and the African continent. But perhaps to start with, I'd like to address matters in a local context. I think this Congress of Accountants is coming at a very crucial time for Mauritius, would you believe? Very crucial time for Mauritius, because you may have a look at the papers, most of them are in French, but some are in English. And if you do have a look at the papers, you see the number of financial scandals, I would call, happening at the moment in Mauritius. And I think it's something that we all need to have a look at and to see how, as accountants, we can reflect on the accuracy and fairness and timeliness of corporate reporting. Now, that's not something that I'm talking about in a hypothetical way. In Mauritius at the moment, it's a very topical issue. We have a number of corporate failures and banking failures and insurance failures, where if you wanted to have a cheeky eye, you would actually blame maybe the auditors or the accountants. And it will be up to the courts eventually to decide who's at fault. But I think question marks are being raised here every single day. And in fact, to make it worse, some of these companies are major listed entities. So it in fact affects the public at large. These various financial scandals probably affecting something like more 200 or 300,000 account holders, policy holders, depositors, etc. So for a small country like Mauritius, it's a vastly important issue. So I think perhaps as part of your deliberations, I know that you're also going to look at institutions. As part of your deliberations, I think we need to look at the role and effectiveness of accountants and auditors in the current context of the world of today. And to what extent we can as accountants hope to make things better. Now, as I mentioned, also brings to mind or into question the role of institutions. And as accountants from developing countries, we need to, I think we all realize that the success of a country doesn't just depend on what industry it has and what is the port, what are the manufacturing, etc. But it does depend crucially on our institutions, how effective they are, whether they be in financial services, whether they can assure security in our country or whatever. Institutions are playing a vital role in the development and success of every country. And as all of us, nearly all of us from developing countries, I think we do need to look at how that is going to affect future growth. In fact, to finish on that score, we all know that street crime, muggings, larceny, etc., all these are falling, all these are diminishing around the world, not just in our region. But on the other hand, white-collar crime, aided by computers, the internet, etc., is increasing fast. So sometimes I think it's probably an easier world if I go back to accountancy, but maybe accounting at the moment is as hectic or as risky as being in politics. So maybe I should stick to where I am just for the moment. So we have huge challenges for accountants in developing countries, especially, and of course in Africa. And Africa, concluded to this. Africa always believed that Mauritius is very, very lucky to be located where we are throughout history, except maybe in the 18th century, where Mauritius was known as the star and key of the Indian Ocean. From that point onwards, Mauritius was always very far from its markets. Where their source markets were in the 1980s, when we were starting our economic boom, we were importing from Asia and exporting to Europe and exporting to America. But we still made a success of it, and we managed to grow. However, these days, Mauritius is very lucky. We are sited off the coast of one of the most promising continents in the world. We are very, very lucky to be so located, and I think we need to make the most of it, not only, of course, for our own development, for mutual development of the region, where we can work in partnership with other governments, in partnership with companies across the continent, so that we will mutually benefit from what is happening across Africa. Because of course Africa is not just the extractive industries that are booming. Africa is democracy now. Africa is good or better governance. Africa is better use of resources. Africa is also sound economic policies. All these are contributing to the global growth in Africa. And this global growth, of course, is creating a large middle class. And a large middle class consumes a lot of things. So there's a lot of scope for economic development around what is happening in Africa and what is happening in the middle classes in Africa. Now, for 2015, the World Economic Forum estimates that growth in Africa will be 5%. The World Bank a little bit less at 4.6%. That is still a lot of development. Obviously starting from a fairly low base, but still a robust development. Now we see in Mauritius that there is tremendous potential for intra-Africa trade and intra-Africa investment. No need to worry so much what's happening to Europe, what's happening to America, what's happening to Asia. If we were in Africa able to collaborate within ourselves, generate investment within ourselves, and specifically generate trade within ourselves, whether it is to be transformed, to be exported elsewhere from one country, shipped from one country to another, we believe that this would be tremendous potential for growth across the continent. And this is what we've been trying to develop, with some success here and maybe less success elsewhere, but this is what we're trying to develop. Now, we developed some time ago a holistic Africa strategy, which aims to boost investment, which aims to boost trade, whether goods and services, and of course aims to boost exchange of people. That is the crux. When people get to meet each other, that is when deals happen, and that is when friendships are made, and that's when partnerships are created. So for that reason, some years ago, Mauritius abolished all visa requirements. I hope most of you arrive here without any problems so far as visas are concerned, because Mauritius doesn't require any pre-travel visa from any country, from 50 out of 54 countries in Africa. So in fact what we've made is of Mauritius a meeting place, not only between us Africans, but also, since we have no visa requirement for Indians, for Chinese, for Russians, for Europeans, for Americans, Mauritius can be a hub, a meeting place for all the peoples of the world to meet people of the region. And that is, I think, one thing that we need to stress is that, thank you, is a welcoming. In fact, I'll tell you how it happened. we were receiving the then Nigeria Minister of Finance, Ngozi, and she was coming with a large delegation. When I picked her up at the airport, she had about 10 people with her, that's all. So I said, you know what's happening? And she said, well, my people are very upset because you've asked for visas and they didn't even want to apply because they thought it wasn't right to ask for visas from regional countries. And from that point in time, we went and did away with all the visa requirements with no problem at all, actually. No problem at all. So one of the few African countries to have done that. So we went to meeting of people. We've appointed also roving ambassadors. We'll hopefully reappoint them soon again with a new government. Roving ambassadors. We believe in appointing honorary consuls across all the capitals and the major cities. Maybe some of you here could help us out. We need honorary consuls across Africa. We set up here in the Board of Investment an Africa Center of Excellence, where we would give advice not only to Mauritians but to anyone in the world. We would give advice on investment and trade opportunities across the continent. In order to help on goods and trade, goods particularly, there's a subsidy on freight exports to freight costs to regional ports. There's a subsidy on credit guarantee and insurance. And in fact, if you're manufacturing for Africa only, no other place, if you're manufacturing in Mauritius for Africa only, you're allowed to sell it in the free port, and in the free port of Mauritius you pay 0% tax. So we've gone some way, a long way if you want, to helping our industry and the region in developing intra-Africa trade. And I think that goes on like this, but a number of things. I don't want to go into too much today, maybe my colleagues will today or tomorrow. What I want to talk to you about is that the one remaining factor that we need to have in Mauritius and across Africa, and that is connectivity. It is difficult to move around in Africa. It's difficult to move from Mauritius to the rest of the continent. It's difficult to move people. It's difficult to move goods. It's more expensive to have a container move from Mauritius maybe to Mombasa than from China to Mombasa, and that is not right. And we have to work on that further. But I think we're coming to the end of, we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. We're talking to the Chinese authorities very seriously about Mauritius becoming a hub for traffic from Africa to Asia. And that will make a big difference if tomorrow we have not only large number of flights from China, all the towns in China to Mauritius, and onwards to all the capitals around Africa. Hopefully that will come to fruition, and if it does, it will change completely the role of Mauritius in the region, because an island requires connectivity. Without connectivity, an island is just a lonely place. With connectivity, we can be the center of everything. So we are working on connectivity. We think that is one little weakness that we have, and that we have to address. With connectivity, we can not only develop our financial services and become a center for finance for the whole region. There's also development of educational services coming up very, very much in terms of tertiary education. A medical hub, so that we can provide medical services. We have already some very good hospitals here. We talked about shipping, and of course, airport transit and tourism. And on that note, I'll end to say that as Minister of Tourism, we see great potential for development of tourism in Mauritius from across the continent and vice versa. And I hope that when you go back to your respective countries, you'll put in a good word for us. So thank you very much, and with these words of hope and optimism for the continent, as well as the words of caution about the problems encountered by the profession in Mauritius, I would like to declare the third Africa Congress of Accountants open. Thank you very much.
Many of the delegates, and they are coming back with their families. Honorable Deputy Prime Minister Xavier Duval, Honorable Alain Wong, Minister of Civil Services and Administrative Reforms, Honorable Sunil Goda, Minister of Business Enterprise and Cooperatives, Mrs. Olivia Curti, President of IFAC, Professor Musa Assad, President of PAFA, Presidents, Chairman, CEOs, Your Excellencies, fellow accountants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 3rd Africa Congress of Accountants. And for those who made all this way to come to Mauritius, welcome to Mauritius, and I hope you've already made yourself at home. And the first time when I've talked on Africa Congress of Accountants was back in Douala in May 2014. That was exactly 367 days ago when I did my presentation over there. And after my presentation, many of you who were there at that meeting told me, oh, I think you should change your job to become a travel agent. And I think I will seriously consider that after this. And as we said, we wanted to make ACOA 2015 an African event. And this is reflected in most of the topics that we are discussing, which really affects day-to-day problems or issues regarding the continent. And we also wanted to make ACOA 2015 an unforgettable one for everybody. Because coming to Mauritius, I mean, we wanted to, if we had a conference center near the coast, that would have been excellent. Unfortunately, but we are a small place. We don't have a lot to travel, so that's one of the big advantages. And this is reflected in the internationalization of this conference, because to date we have around 50 participants from 50 countries for ACOA 2015, of which around 38 is from Africa. And in this Congress, we're also using a lot of new tools, which has probably never been used before in Mauritius, like our mobile app, in our sessions, question and answers online from the delegates to the chairperson who can view the questions online and ask the panel the questions. This is where we want to make the difference, and we want to make a leap forward. So I would, those of you who haven't downloaded the mobile app yet, you can do so on Android or an iOS. And if you need help, there's the desk there who can help you. The theme of the event was carefully chosen around less than 1 year ago. And we started the reason for the participation. That's fine. All right. The theme of the event is Africa Rising, and this is shown in the number of participants from the different countries here for this ACOA. And it's people from all around the world are very interested in what is happening in this particular side of the world, because we all know Africa is the last frontier. It is growing, it has a growing middle class. And one experience of which we didn't know in Mauritius, because a very long time ago, I used to work in the tourism industry, and we used to plan everything. But I've learned today, I mean, we received several emails, people just sending emails saying, I'm coming. And they are here today, right? This is something new for us, but it's really great to see the enthusiasm of people coming to this Congress. And particularly, I would like to thank the Minister, who at that particular time would talk about removing all the visa requirements for all the most of the countries in Africa. This has really greatly facilitated the entry of people for this Congress. And I just wanted to give you some stats. For this Congress, we have around 800 plus over people who are registered. And obviously, the most is from Mauritius, over 150 somewhere there. But the second country with the biggest number of delegates is Nigeria. Around 130. And then third place we have Ghana. Then we have around a couple of countries, probably more or less the same. Tanzania, Uganda. We have Kenya as well. And surprisingly, and I'm presently pleased, surprisingly pleased that people from Spain have come to this Congress. Lawyers from Radian Island. And some people from Kosovo. So, on this note, I'd like to thank very much firstly our sponsors who have made this event possible. Our platinum sponsor, the Association of National Accountants of Nigeria. Our gold sponsors, CGMA, ACCA, ICAW, and our only local gold sponsor, Intercontinental Trust. I'd also like to mention our bronze sponsors, Integra, PwC, EY, Deloitte, Sage Pastel, and our media partners, airline partners, South African Airways and Emirates, and also our other partners. IPAC has really supported us tremendously in this endeavor, with the World Bank, the Africa Development Bank, ICANN, and last but not least, the government of Mauritius, who have supported us tremendously through the Board of Investment. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ken. And also, last but not least, is you are the most important. Without you, this event is not possible. Thank you very much for being here. I'd also like to thank all the people who have worked tirelessly to make this event possible. The full-time staff, I'll mention two people, Manuel, thank you very much, and Sicha. I'd like to thank members of the board as well, who have supported me in this great endeavor. They know how many phone calls they've had from me. And some of them even found it strange the day I don't call them. And also members of the organizing committee. And here I would like to mention Kamal for his passion for this event. On this note, I'd like to wish all of you to have a great Congress. Have a great time in Mauritius after the Congress though. But afternoon you can still enjoy on the beach. It's very safe. If there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. Enjoy our Mauritian hospitality. Thank you very much.
Mr. Oliver Ketley, the AFA President, Asmari Smoky, Madam President, Pan-African Federation of Accountants, Mr. Clayford, the Chairman of Mipa, the Mauritius Institute of Professional Accountants. We have representation from the World Bank, from the African Development Bank, our professional colleagues, all distinguished presidents, chairs of all of Africa's PAOs, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, accountants, good afternoon again. This evening, my remarks are going to be basically on the definition of accounting. This is something I've been doing for many, many years, and you must have known now. Accounting is the art or science, we have a large theory of accounting, of identifying recording, classifying, summarizing, reporting, and if you want, interpreting economic activities from a financial perspective. I offer this definition because I want us to assess what is the role of ourselves as professional accountants in Africa. The thesis I'm driving is, I think there are areas we're not doing that well. If we take our role as capturing, doing some analytical work and reporting of economic events, I suggest that we're not doing very well in 3 areas, and I'm going to mention them. These areas are: 1, public sector accounting; 2, SMBs, small and medium practices, and of course SMEs. But also, lastly for me, is in terms of agriculture. Why do I mention agriculture? In the course of coming here, in the bus, somebody told me that actually the pineapples we ate in our hotels are imported from Saudi Arabia. I said, no. Saudi Arabia doesn't manufacture pineapples, doesn't produce pineapples. How can they export pineapples to Mauritius? But assuming that is actually the case, there is a failure on our part, I think, in terms of the service we provide to agriculture. Now, I'll start with the public sector. If you look at the public sector, I think in Africa it accounts for about 70% of all financial flows in business terms. So a lot of what we do as private businesses, we interact with the public sector. But the thesis I'm suggesting here is we actually ignore the public sector for quite a long time. And this is coming out of my interactions with professionals in accounting. I've chaired the Tanzanian PAO for about 7 years. I've interacted with PAOs within East Africa and across Africa, and I noticed some resistance among ourselves in terms of our approach to the public sector, and I think that is something we need to address. The public sector has quite a lot of challenges. One, in terms of numbers of human resources, quite limited. In terms of the level of skills and competencies, also my view is quite limited. But I also think in terms of our depth of interaction with the public sector is quite weak. And these are areas I think we must address going forward. What is our role in public sector accounting? I see 3 roles. One, in terms of revenue mobilization, and there is a significant role for accountants to play in terms of assisting governments. And when we say public sector, we mean the central government. We also include local government authorities. And in both of these levels, we have a role to play as professional accountants in terms of revenue mobilization, both in terms of taxes, but also in terms of non-tax revenues. Many years ago, when I graduated as BCom, I graduated way back in 1987, about 50% of my graduating class were employed by the Tanzania Revenue Authorities. And within a year, the collection doubled. More than doubled in a year, because we had competent staff that were collecting revenues. The sad thing is, in 10 years, a lot of those people failed to prevent themselves from privately benefiting from the collection, and as a result, almost a large number of them are no longer employees of the Tanzania Revenue Authority. So that is the challenge, but definitely we have a role to play in terms of boosting revenue mobilization in the public service. But I also think we have a role to play in terms of recording expenditure and monitoring expenditure in the public service as well, in terms of getting rid of waste and inefficiencies. And who is better to do that than professional accountants? So we have a role there as well. But my final role, I think, in terms of our work in public service, in terms of improving reporting. And our work there is going to be in terms of being accountants, like Accountant General's office, but also in terms of working in the offices, Auditor General, Controller, and Auditor Generals. These are the 3 roles that I think if we fulfill them well, then we will be doing justice to our work as professionals in the public service. In terms of SMPs, we all know that SMPs in Africa, they operate as lone wolves. A single partner, which is not supposed to happen, but you have firms that have just a single partner. By definition, that should not happen. partnership should be more than one, at least two or more. But we have found that a lone wolf. And of course, as a lone wolf, the challenge you have is limited opportunities. Limited opportunities because you can only hunt the animals you can manage. And these tend to be usually small animals. So you go for small olive and not large olives. And of course, in time, when you get old, you starve because you can't do most of the work anymore. And I think the problem with SMPs is they focus almost purely on animals. But my view is I think they need help. SMPs need help. And some of those know that they need help, but some of those don't know that they need help. So PAFA, I think through our professional accounting organization in our countries, we need to provide solutions to SMPs. And one of these definitely is going to be pooling of resources and country experiences so that our SMPs can benefit from this knowledge that we have within our countries. I have the example of SKC. SKC is an Irish professional firm. Way back in the 80s, was a very small firm, but it was an auditor for one of the largest companies way back in the 90s, which was exporting bananas. This company is known as Fives, was known as Fives. I'm not sure if it still exists, but SKC grew from a very small firm to a large firm simply because they grew on the basis of a company that was also growing very fast. So that works for small firms, but in my view, if we pool resources, that is another avenue we can help small firms, and my view is I think there's a role for the Pan-African Federation of Accountants in consultation with PAOs to do something better in terms of assisting our SMPs. And of course, when we assist SMPs, we also indirectly also assist SMEs, which is basically the engine of growth in Africa. The third area that I said I was going to mention is our role in agriculture. If you flew Africa from one point to another, you will know very easily that we have the largest reserves of fresh water, and I think the most suitable land in terms of agriculture. But do we benefit from these resources? I don't think we do. I think large businesses, large agricultural businesses are okay. But small and medium practices in terms of businesses pursuing agriculture, they are not okay. But I think there is immense potential in us assisting agriculture as one of the drivers of the African economy generally. And I think the same issues that I mentioned earlier are applicable here as well. So my message then is for us to work harder in terms of increasing our level of interactions with the public sector, as the Pan-African Federation of Accountants, to increase the level of service we can provide to SMPs and therefore SMEs. And the last point I'm making is for us to work harder in terms of assisting agriculture to fulfill its immense role as a driver of the African economy.
Well, honored to be here with so many distinguished speakers and other participants, and I really look forward to the next few days. The theme of this conference and the topic of the first plenary session is Africa Rising, partnering for results in the public and private sector. Africa is indeed rising. Globally, when we think of growth, we often think of the so-called BRICS countries. But when it comes to growth, Ethiopia rivals China, and Zambia outpaces India. You are seeing rapid economic growth at an average of 5% per year in sub-Saharan Africa over the past decade. Yes, Africa is indeed rising, and we should applaud that. But Africa is also at a crossroads. Despite economic growth, we would all like to have much more progress in reducing poverty, improving people's lives, and putting in place the foundations for more inclusive and sustainable growth. This conference provides an excellent opportunity to discuss the role the accountancy profession can play in helping Africa convert its economic growth into real opportunities and a brighter future. Let's look at some of the topics we'll be exploring. I'm particularly excited about exploring Mauritius as an African financial hub. However, maximizing this opportunity and achieving this recognition will require a robust institutional framework, adoption and implementation of international standards, and creating and sustaining high-quality financial reporting through strong and effective regulation and enforcement. Other countries that have been successful in attracting substantial capital flows typically have a robust infrastructure in place. We'll talk more about many of these different aspects in tomorrow's session. Adoption of International Financial Reporting Standards, or IFRS, for publicly listed entities with effective enforcement of the standards by the local securities regulators to ensure consistent application is one of these items. The adoption of IFRS for small and medium-sized entities is also encouraged, as it provides a sound basis for financial reporting for smaller businesses and may assist them in raising capital to expand. A strong and effective community complying with international standards on auditing, or ICES, an effective independent audit oversight that contributes to audit quality and ethical behavior. Integrated reporting. While financial reporting is essential, markets need a more complete understanding of a business. There's a real opportunity here in Mauritius to follow South Africa's lead in implementing integrated reporting for companies. A government that's effective and transparent, high-quality financial reporting based on accrual-based international public sector accounting standards, or IPSAS, helps ensure that public sector managers have the complete and reliable information necessary to manage public resources, and citizens and other stakeholders have the information necessary to hold the government accountable. As we'll hear more about in the days to come, the session on PAOs and human capacity, members of the accounting profession are essential participants in establishing this infrastructure, and effective and efficient PAOs are the foundation of a strong accountancy profession. From promoting adoption and supporting implementation of international standards to acting as trusted advisors to government, an effective PAO supports a strong accountancy profession that is highly skilled, behaves ethically, and acts in the public interest. And to complete this virtuous circle, a strong accountancy profession is a critical element in many areas, including, first of all, a strong profession is essential to providing support for capital markets, preparing and auditing financial results that provide assurance for lenders and investors. Second, a strong accountancy profession is essential to providing support for small and medium-sized entities, which we know are so critical to the African region. These are the cornerstone of economic growth and development, particularly here in Africa. And third, a strong accountancy profession is essential to enhance public sector governance, transparency, and accountability so the countries can realize their goals of achieving sustainable economic development and providing better services to their citizens, and ultimately reducing poverty and inequality. We'll focus on this aspect in tomorrow's session on public sector governance, reporting, and accountability. Africa has 56 countries. Remarkably, about 40% of these do not have a PAO. And for many of those who do have a PAO, the accountancy profession still requires substantial strengthening. IFAC and PAFA have been working together to support PAOs that go on to be self-sufficient and effective organizations. Our partnership maximizes our wide reach, freedom from commercial interests, unique knowledge of the accountancy profession, and access to expertise through a network of partners. It also maximizes our ability to align the needs of the profession and the public and experience in implementing PAO to PAO capacity building programs. In addition, IFAC and PAPA, this work will require significant cooperation between the profession, its stakeholders, donors, and development agencies, making maximum use of all of our unique roles, all of our comparative advantages and contacts. As we move forward with our capacity building efforts, we also need to be ever aware of current and future trends, including the globalization, the speed of technological change, and the changing nature of organizations. Characteristics such as the entrepreneurial spirit, curiosity, creativity, and strategic thinking skills will be essential for accountants tomorrow. We need to rethink everything from our training and development to the type of people attracted to our profession, who will be the best and brightest, and how can we develop the best talent going forward. The children and teenagers of today are surrounded by simulations, gamification, virtual worlds, and of course mobile. And they are the profession of tomorrow. Our education and training systems will need to be interactive, innovative, adaptive, and future-focused if we are going to maximize the learning capabilities of the next generation. And another relevant area to talent, we'll also talk about women in accountancy tomorrow. I'm speaking on this panel, so I don't want to give too much away. But research shows that all society benefits when women are fully empowered and engaged. Despite global goals and stated commitments, we have a long way to go in this area. From school enrollment to economic development, economic independence, to representation in decision-making bodies.
Mipa for inviting the World Bank Group to partner with them and participate in the 3rd African Congress of Accountants. Congress is a really important milestone for the African accountancy profession to define and shape the reforms that will contribute to improving the well-being of African citizens. So on behalf of the World Bank Group and on behalf of Samyan Sadek, who unfortunately could not be with us today, I take this opportunity to welcome you all. And in case you are wondering what happened to my left hand, well, all I would say is you should know that the other guy looks really worse than me. Now, on a more serious note, let me start by reminding you all of what the two overarching strategic goals of the World Bank Group are. And they are goals that have huge relevance to this continent. The first one is to reduce and end extreme poverty. And we have a measurable target that we are going to follow. By 2030, we want only 3% of the world population to live on less than $1.25 a day. Imagine what that means, living on $1.25, all expenses included. We are 12% today, we want to go down to 3%. The second goal is to boost shared prosperity. Prosperity is a great thing, but if it's not shared, it's a source of conflict and envy. So we want to focus on the welfare of the bottom 40% of the population. And the key message I want to leave you with tonight is that the accountancy profession is already helping to achieve these important twin goals in Africa. But together we could do much more to improve the lives of all Africans. So, since we are fortunate enough to be on this beautiful island halfway between Africa and Asia, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about the Asian tiger and the African lion. And let me make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, and be very clear, the African lion is roaring. Africa has been on the rise over the past 2 decades. The sustained economic growth over 20 years has contributed to really successful development in some sense. 3 factors to this sound macroeconomic policies that delivered aggregate stability, basically no inflation or no excessive inflation. Second key factor, high investments, increasingly financed by foreign savings, which means foreign direct investment. And third and finally, the strong performance of resource-rich countries supported by rising international prices for commodities and fueled by the growth in Asia and in China in particular. But given that growth, you would expect poverty to have reduced significantly. And while we have seen substantial progress in improving the lives of citizens globally, in Africa the performance is much more disappointing. In 1990, when the world population was about 5.2 billion, 36% of people lived in extreme poverty. Today, with 7.3 billion people, we are at 12%. That means that nearly 1 billion people live on less than $1.25 a day. Many still do not have access to basic services. 1.4 billion people in the world do not have access to electricity. So forget about your iPhone or your apps or your connectivity. If you don't have electricity, you can't even read your books to study for school. Many children go to bed without food. Many children are not going to school. 70% of the world's extreme poor still live in rural villages. And the vast majority of these extreme poor live on our continent, in Africa. In Africa, despite that sustained economic growth, averaging above 5% in the past 2 decades, poverty has only reduced by 13 percentage points, from 60% to 47%. It's better than nothing, but it's certainly not as good as the global performance of the rest of the world, particularly Asia. This is a challenge that we all need to understand in order to address it. So why? Why is this slow pace in poverty reduction despite growth in our continent? 3 key reasons for this that I'm going to go into a bit more detail on. First one is fragility and conflict. This chart shows that after a decrease through the mid-2000s, violent deaths due to conflict and violence against civilians in particular has steadily risen since 2012. Contrary to previous decades, violence is largely concentrated in a small number of sub-regions in our continent. And what we saw is a reduction in traditional types of armed conflict and an increase in non-traditional attacks. These include things you've seen on the news: election-related violence, extremism, terrorist attacks, Boko Haram in Nigeria and Cameroon and Chad, Al-Shabaab in Kenya and Somalia, drug trafficking, maritime piracy, and criminality. Clearly, this kind of violence, which undermines peace and stability, poses by far, the greatest threat to the region's economic performance and to the well-being of its citizens. Reducing conflict risks and promoting stability should be especially high on the agenda of policymakers. And as leaders of this continent, we have a responsibility in the accounting and auditing profession to do something about this. I'm pleased to say that the accounting profession is already making a difference by helping create transparent and accountable states where they do not exist yet, and by allowing development partners to provide assistance in the most challenging environments. The profession is partnering with governments in fragile states such as Somalia, South Sudan, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, and the list continue, to help improve public accountability and to help produce financial statements where they didn't exist previously. We as a profession should be proud of what we have done to fight fragility and conflict in this way. And I also want to acknowledge and commend the work of more established PAOs, such as Ghana, Kenya, or Senegal, for instance, working with the PAOs of more fragile countries, such as Burundi, Guinea-Bissau, and Liberia, to help develop the profession there. This is